Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Hornstein. Welcome to the No Not Crazy podcast, where we explore the invalidating messages we internalize, their effects on our lives, and the ways we can free ourselves from them. We've all had those experiences that make us question ourselves and even sometimes feel a little crazy. Let's stop accepting the idea that there is something inherently wrong with us and begin to appreciate that actually there is something fundamentally right. So join me, and together we can all feel a little less crazy. So today I am joined by Andrew Harvey. Andrew, it's wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us here. Thank you.
Lovely to be with you.
Thank you. I'm just going to read your bio and then we can get to all the things we have to discuss. That's okay. All right. Andrew Harvey is an internationally acclaimed writer, poet, translator, and mystical teacher. He is the author and editor of over 40 books, including Son of Man, The Hope, Love is Everything, Turn Me to Gold, Engoldenment, and Radical Regeneration. He has won the Christmas Humphreys Prize, the Nautilus Prize twice, and was the subject of the BBC documentary, The Making of a Modern Mystic. Andrew has taught all over the world, given over 20 courses for the Shift Network, and is the founder of the Institute for Sacred Activism.
It's exhausting, isn't it?
Are you exhausted, Andrew?
I am. I'm not exhausted. I'm thrilled, but it's so strange to hear your life read out like that.
I bet. And what an incredible life.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It's been a while.
You've done so much. It's amazing. So thank you for joining us here on this topic of invalidation and validation on the other side of it. And I know this touches you both in your personal life and in your professional life. So I'd like to get to both of those if we can. So in your book, Sun at Midnight, you talk about your experience in a spiritual community with a spiritual leader. That was an incredibly invalidating experience. And really one of those situations that we, I think, all experience at some level, but this was a pretty dramatic one where something's off, something's wrong, something doesn't feel right, but you keep kind of twisting yourself, and you're trying to find any sort of answer to what you're experiencing than what the truth is, right? That was in front of you, right? So I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about that experience and what that was like. Yeah.
The Sun at Midnight is my memoir of my dark night. And that was brought about by my teacher, a woman who claimed to be the Divine Mother, whom I'd been the leading disciple of for 15 years, telling me that I couldn't be with the man I loved, I'd fallen in love with, because there was no place for gay people in the queendom of the Mother. I'd given my whole life, my whole heart, my whole soul to Mother Mirror, and I had devoted myself, really devastating my life in order to do so, to her. And I'd had some absolutely life-transforming mystical experiences through that devotion. So I believed completely that she was a living incarnation of the Divine Mother. And then I met this extraordinary man who was later to become my husband, and fell very deeply in love with him, and knew that that love was holy and sacred and transforming, and something that I'd yearned for and longed for so many years, and never believed that I would find, and had found, and was longing to share the beauty of it with her. And she turned around and said, you have to leave him, you have to abandon him, there's no place for gay people in the Kingdom of the Mother. And I realized she cannot be who she's claiming to be, because there's no way in which the mother of the cosmos would be in any way destructive of real love. And there's no way in which the mother of the cosmos or anybody possessed by authentic divine mother consciousness would be homophobic. So then I had to really announce what she'd said, which was devastating, because I'd been somebody who'd written a book about how she was who she claimed to be. And so I had to really honor all the people I now knew I had misled by telling the truth. But that plunged my life into absolute boiling chaos and madness, because she lied. And a great many people refused to believe me, because, like I had been, they were so addicted to her and to what they were imagining they were receiving from her and to the propaganda around her, that they couldn't surrender that to this devastating new version that I was presenting.
Right.
And so my life plunged really into 3 years of agony. My husband nearly died. We had death threats. Bombs were thrown through our window. People who found me the flavor of the month the year before, when I first went to San Francisco, I was in San Francisco at the time, denounced me as the Antichrist, which was in some ways quite fun, because it's a not insignificant figure to be denounced as, and that at least was something. If you're going to be denounced as the Antichrist. But the inner experience was one of absolute agony, horror, devastation. But what I learned through the process, and this is, I think, what's really important about Sun at Midnight, is what everyone learns through an authentic dark night, that the most terrible thing that can happen to you can be the birth canal of a wholly larger, more expanded, more authentic, more creative, more joyful, regenerated self. So when I look back on the experience, I am supremely grateful to it, not to her for giving it to me, but she was the unwitting agent of an evolutionary will of the Divine Mother to spring me free of my addiction to her, so that I could discover in myself what I projected onto her. I could discover the love and the joy and the power and the stamina and the passion and the beauty in my own self, rather than be condemned to project it on someone else and always be separated from it. So my greatest invalidation led to an experience which has only grown in the years since, of being divine, of really not needing a guru that is divine to become divine, but acknowledging my own and everyone else's divinity. And that led to 30 years of wild creativity, which has culminated in this new book of mine, Radical Regeneration, which is actually grounded in that experience of Sun at Midnight, because in this book, which I wrote with Carolyn Baker, I've really tried to make as clear as possible that the whole world now is going through this global dark night experience. And that it is as painful, as terrible, as bewildering, as anxiety-ridden, as devastatingly strange as the experience I lived through. But because I was graced to live through that experience to its end and be birthed by it into a wholly new level of consciousness and a wholly new level of creativity, of passion and insight and knowledge, what I have come to understand is that this terrifying process that we're in is actually a birthing process in which, if we can endure it, if we can align with its laws, we can become a different humanity, a new humanity, an embodied divine humanity, capable of co-creating with God a wholly new world with extraordinary new powers of love and passion for justice and compassion. That's what my book is dedicated to, celebrating in all of its different facets. It's a huge book, and it's very wild, and it's very unflinching in how it faces the dark, because
it is
what I knew when I was going through my own personal dark night is that there is no way out but through. You can't bypass it. It's happening to you like cholera, like typhoid, like a terrifying illness. You can't just scrub yourself free of typhoid or drink a Coca-Cola and cure AIDS. You've somehow got to find the way through. But what I learned in my own dark night was that if you follow the great mystics who know this process, if you really let them speak to you and say to you, look, the dark night is terrifying, but it's terrifying with the purpose. It's the purpose is to strip you of your illusions and fantasies and everything you cling to, so that you can discover you're far larger, far greater, far more magnificent, far braver, far more spacious than anything you ever imagined when you were in what you thought was yourself, which was just a small ego created out of convention and karma and neurosis and trauma. What a wild, wild adventure Dark Night, my Dark Night was, but what a wild adventure we're on in the world at the moment. But there's a great possibility being given to us through it, just as it was given to us.
Right. It's an interesting question, because getting to that point where you can see it, where you even see that there's that need for transformation, because even in your personal experience with that, it took some time, right, before you saw what was really going on and could sort of acknowledge it and deal with it.
Yes.
You know, at
just
face
as it's
value,
taking
right?
a lot of people a lot of time to realize that systems are bankrupt, they're corrupt, and that we really are in a suicidal, matricidal downslide into the abyss. It's a very frightening realization. No wonder we avoid it. When we wake up to it, extraordinary new insight can be given to us by those who've already been through a dark night experience, who can say, don't be afraid. This is the sign that a massive evolutionary transformation is going on. That's why I wrote this book, because what saved me in my dark night was my passion for Rumi, my passion for the Christ, my passion for mystical literature. And what I learned from that passion was that the dark night is the birth canal. And I clung to the poems in the tradition, especially to Rumi's poetry, as a drowning man would cling to a raft, because I realized the mystics are the ones who know the truth of this process, not the psychologists, not the scientists, not the economists, not the politicians, but the mystics who are one with the savage, relentless passion of divine love itself, which uses darkness and light, chaos and order, agony and joy to work its extraordinary alchemy. And because I was able to cling to them and to their amazing maps and words, I was able to stay sane and able to allow myself to be dismantled and remade. And that's why Carolyn and I decided to write this book in the way that we wrote it, because so many people are now waking up to the extremity of the situation and rushing into despair and paralysis and, oh my God, it can never get better. This is the end. This is the end, without knowing what only the great mystics who have lived through this process can tell them, as they told me in my dark night, which is what I've written about in Sun at Midnight, which is that what Rumi says in this amazing poem, the grapes of my body can only become wine after the winemaker tramples me. I surrender my body like grapes to his trampling, so my inmost heart can blaze and dance with joy. And although the grapes go on sobbing blood and screaming, I cannot bear any more anguish. I cannot bear any more cruelty. The trampler stuffs cotton in his ears and says, it is I who am the master of this work. You can deny me if you want, you have every excuse, but when, through my passion, you reach perfection, you will never be done praising my name. I clung to that poem with every breath of my being, because I knew he knew and I didn't know. But if I just trusted and surrendered and abandoned and loved the divine enough, the divine would find a way through for me. And that's what I have expanded tremendously with Carolyn in this book, Radical Regeneration, to show three things: that we're in a potential extinction crisis, a global dark night, that global dark night has two faces, one of utterly terrifying final destruction of everything we love, everything we care about, which could come soon if we continue to go on doing what we're doing, but also of an unimaginable possibility of a new kind of human being born out of horror and chaos. Embodied divine human being, just as the kind of being that's born out of a mystical dark night is. And the third thing is that this is a process which is ordained and has this goal of a divine humanity as its radiant possibility, but we must choose it. We must become conscious of the real map. And we must align ourselves with the law of the dark night. We must hold the two vast opposites of potential extinction and potential transfiguration in our heart minds, and we must learn as much as we can about this divinization process, which is what I've been devoting the last 30 years to be able to be here at this moment offering this truth. And I wouldn't have been able to do any of this without having gone through it myself. You have to go through it all to be able to say to human beings at this moment, don't be afraid. It's terrifying, but there's a meaning. This is the meaning. This is the way through. This is the 5 laws, as you probably have gathered from this book, of what the dark night does. And this is the way to transfiguration, because I'm beginning to experience the beginnings of it in myself. I know this birth of a new humanity is real because I'm living it. Hundreds of thousands of people on the earth are living it. And what we need to do now is not to be cowed and depressed and broken down by the horror of what's happening. That's inevitable in the dark night process. We won't get out of it. But to grow birth eyes, to grow eyes that are soaked with illumination and can see the signs of radical regeneration, of the birth happening in and through the death, and encourage the heaven and the hell out of it. And dedicate our lives to being born as much as possible and helping others be born into their essential self and their essential mission and their essential passion and their essential service. So,
yes. And I agree with everything you just said. When you're not preaching to the choir, right? So yeah. I am open to this, as many are. It seems to me one of the challenges we face as a society, as a planet, is if people are not at that point. What you're calling for is a radical approach.
2 minutes to midnight, and that's a conservative estimate. Yeah.
Right. So we need everybody, right? It's not about us, shouting obscenities at our TVs while we watch the news.
That helps sometimes.
It does. Yeah. It does feel good, but I don't know how effective it is. And it's, and it's not about hoping that the corrupt forces suddenly have love in their hearts.
Oh my God, that's fatal.
I think,
that's a complete fantasy.
Past that point. Yeah. So it is about everybody needing to do this within themselves.
I have also in these last years made a study of evolutionary science. And one of the things that I've learned is that species only mutate in extreme convulsions, in extreme crisis. For example, millions of years ago, there were lots of fish in a toxic sea. And some of the braver and madder fish jumped out of the sea and found themselves in a completely alien element on the burning sand, and they couldn't breathe because they didn't have the lungs yet evolved to breathe. But a great force in them drove them to, over time, evolve those lungs and the organs that would enable them to survive in this completely unfamiliar dimension. And believe it or not, those fish became birds. So massive mutations are possible under extreme pressure. And there is a great spiritual awakening happening on the planet. It's chaotic, and there are a lot of bad teachers, and they're being told a lot of garbage through New Age. But there are some of us on the planet who've been through authentic transmutations in the authentic mystical systems, who have really done everything we can to make available to everyone who's awakening the kinds of practices, the kinds of maps, the kinds of truths that we have won for ourselves so that they can use them. And that's what we put into radical regeneration. So it won't be much use if you haven't had any kind of awakening to go to a book like this. But if you are beginning to see how dreadful the situation, but also beginning to guess that so extreme a situation must have some kind of goal within it, or could have some kind of goal within it, then this is your book, because this is the book written by two elders who've been through and continue to go through massive transformations, who've rooted everything they know in the ancient systems, but also in political and social and economic understanding. It's a very broad book. It brings together all forms of human knowledge. And there is a map. There is a way through. It's not an easy way through, but there is a way through. We know because we're on that way through, and we can offer it in the clearest possible terms we are capable of. That's what we've tried to do.
It's a brilliant book, and it is very thorough and it really covers so many important aspects.
The only thing it doesn't cover is the recipe for celery soup, which I don't know.
Do you see this as a moment in time that this is a sea change?
Oh, yeah.
Because I look at human history, and it does seem that from the beginning of time, people have been fighting for power. People have been killing each other. People have been doing horrible things.
I don't think that's completely
You don't think
true.
that's true?
No, I think there are great elements of truth in that. But I think if you look at evolutionary history, you see that humanity began in an essentially matriarchal culture and an essentially indigenous communion with the whole of nature, worshipping a mother goddess. And that worship gave a very deep, reverential, compassionate sense of unity with nature. There was killing and there was struggles for power, but there was also a massive reverence for life. Then that was fractured, and then there was another set of revelations in which humanity broke through into divine transcendence, which was a massive breakthrough. But then that became an addiction. So people dropped nature, dropped life, dropped sexuality, dropped the body to go off into the light. And that's why great prophets like Jesus and the prophet came, who tried to marry the great ancient vision of communion and unity with the mother with this great transcendent realization. So within all this chaos and horror, there has been this evolutionary adventure, which is culminating now. It's culminating now in two very extraordinary ways. On the one hand, you can see it's culminating in a massive explosion of interrelated crises, which are the results of our hubris and our passion for domination and our drunkenness on separation and our patriarchal addiction to hierarchy and power over. That's obvious. That's what's happening. They're all interrelated. They're all intractable. They can't be solved within the existing consciousness. And they're all in an orgy of massive global destruction right now, getting worse as we speak. That's one side. And the other side is that this is the moment in which humanity can actually bring together all of the great advances in evolutionary knowledge that we have actually achieved, this band of radiant adventurers, this band of what Betty Kovacs calls the merchants of light, that have been struggling in age after age to divinize the human. Well, their wisdom, their knowledge from all the traditions, along with all the practices, all of that is now available to us. So at the time of our most extreme danger, we have within our power, through divine grace, the capacity to bring together, to synthesize, to integrate the most extraordinary vision of who we are essentially and who we could be that we ever have had. How astounding this moment is. But if you characterize human history just as a long saga of chaos, horror, and murder, which is one way of looking at it, but while forgetting this
other part,
in this tremendous adventure, you've only seen one side of the picture. And that won't help you now when both sides are coming together in their fullest intensity. Full intensity of the dark with the fullest imaginable intensity of the light. And what's so amazing when you really dive into it is that they're interrelated. The very intensity of the dark is compelling people like you, people like me, people like Jeff, people like Aurobindo, all the people who for 150 years have come into this knowledge to make this knowledge as real, as practical, as helpful, as grounded, as relevant, as exciting, as thrilling, as encouraging, as empowering, and to live it as intensely as possible of ourselves, because we know that we're part of a great evolutionary shift. So the dark is our friend in that transformation. It's compelling us, forcing us, like leaping out of that toxic sea, forced those fish to develop new organs or die. And some of us are developing the beginnings of the new organs of perception that allow us to get a taste of what this new human is like.
Yes. And thank you for that perspective, because it is encouraging. It brings hope. And
this, of course, but there is always hope, and there's most hope. And again, I think that's what Sun at Midnight taught me. If you'd met me a week into the dark night, when my life was in danger, my husband had been diagnosed with cancer, everything was falling apart, my love of 15 years, the great devotion that I'd had to a divine human, I thought was in tatters, and said to me, this is going to be the most wonderful, extraordinary adventure of your life. I'm going to bring you things you'd never even begin to imagine. I would have thrown you out of my home and said, how dare you talk to me like that? Look what's happening. And I would have been right in the state of consciousness that I was in. But from where I am now, seeing that time, I say, thank God I went through that.
So you feel like what got you through is, because it always interests me, some people go through that dark night, right? And they don't come out the other side.
Right.
And some don't come out at all. Some don't come out in good shape.
Some go mad, some kill themselves, some bitter, some turn to the dark. Any possibilities?
Yeah. So it's so interesting to me when people have gone through something like that and have been able to get to that other side. And so I'm always asking what you think it was for you. And you just answered some of that, like unique about either your internal world or your external world that could get you through that.
I think the answer is actually simple, and it's not just about me, it's about everyone, I think, who does get through, can get through. I think it is a passion for the spirit, passion to stay somehow unified with love, somehow unified with the mystery. I think those who get through the dark night are very often those who are so in love with the mystery that they learn how to bear what the mystery has to do to them to bring them closer into its truth.
Right. And I think also understanding probably that mystery, the darkness is part of it. Right. It's not, we don't get to pick and choose. It's not an a la carte kind of situation where, I want to experience all of life and the mystery and the magic and the depths and the beauty of it. But not this stuff over here.
Right.
You have to embrace all of it.
This is the dark night and the birth, because the highest mystical reality and how life works are one. They're not separate. So looking into the actual ways in which your life has been shaped by loss, by betrayal, by pain, by ordeal, by suffering, and how it's sometimes been shaped for the immeasurably better and richer and deeper. It's not all trauma and horror. It can be revelation and much greater love and much greater empathy. Realizing that, then you begin to understand that this great mystery of life that we're in, whether you call it divine or not, is a mystery that works in this extraordinarily and extremely paradoxical way. And that, I think, is a wonderful way to start to try and help people to understand the great paradox of the great evolutionary definitive crisis that we're in. Does that speak to you?
That does speak to me. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it's hard for people to look that in the eye, to face that paradox and to face all the pieces.
It's extremely
No.
for people who have bought the Kool-Aid of life having to be beautiful and wonderful, and you're
Right.
failing if you're unhappy, or you're failing if you're in pain because you somehow are not spiritual. All the nonsense of both of the New Age and the capitalist fascist cheerfulness. It's even more difficult for us than it is, for example, I've just been in India. If I was to say that to my great friend who is a rickshaw driver, who works his ass off every day for $5 in order to be able to feed his 5 family members, and doesn't have anything left and has to do the next day. He says, of course I know that. I lived that, and I've learned that, and I trust that, and I work with that. So the poor know it. It's the rich who don't know it because they bought a fantasy of being safe.
We are focused on money and power and, appearances and all of these things, comfort, absolutely. And I think, I wonder if one piece of how we get ourselves beyond where we are now as a species is somehow by offering an alternative that is accessible to people and appealing, but more accessible. I mean, it has to be, I feel like sometimes we have to offer some small step for some people. Like maybe some people are like, I'm all in, I want to evolve and, give me the whole thing. But I think we have a large group.
I think, forgive me, darling, I love what you're saying. I can hear the mercy and sweetness in it. But we're like somebody in the 3rd stage of cancer. There's not going to be a sweet cure now. It's going to be a fierce cure.
Do they have to be mutually exclusive? I guess. Can we offer the Hail Mary, this is it, we're going off a cliff kind of medicine, but also do something to shift whatever percentage of the population of people, maybe aren't ready to go there yet.
The majority of people will never be ready. They'll only be ready if they ever are through extreme crisis and extreme suffering. That's been the case throughout human history. But for this kind of transformation, we may not need a great majority. We just need a determined minority. All the great shifts in human adventure have come through a minority taking very urgently and seriously the predicament. And in evolutionary terms, if enough people change in all kinds of ways, those changes will inevitably ripple up and across the interdependent web that we're all connected by.
What you're saying, I think, is really important about if enough people do that, there will be this ripple effect.
They could.
Hopefully. And I think I'm not going to quite give up on that piece of it yet. And I think, in the context of what I do around validation,
I think it's
some of my belief is that if we really had a change in our orientation of how we approach each other, right? How we speak to each other, which really right now, the reflex is to be invalidating rather than validating. And I think if we really shifted to being a more validating culture or species, I think that would really, first of all, it would preempt a lot of the problems we come to. I think if people felt valued for things other than money and success and looks and this and that and the other thing, I think it would heal. Exactly. It would heal a lot of just feeling accepted. So, that's kind of the ripple effect I'm hoping.
I think it's wonderful. I want to validate you. I want to validate you. Of course.
And I want to validate you.
It's a wonderful, in a way, what we're doing is having this father-mother dance. The mother is saying we have to really tend to people where they are right now, because their crucial pain comes from feeling unseen, unheard, devalued on every level in this culture. So let's start there, because from that healing of that terrible psychic wound, so many things can flower. And the father is saying, it's very urgent. We have to do it now. If you marry those two things, if there's a marriage that it doesn't happen in the mind because it won't be a mental marriage, But I marry it by trying to say that the new human will be a midwife warrior. So
that
both can be true in us. On the one hand, we can be constantly doing what you are doing to me and I'm trying to do to you, is encouraging, loving, saying, yes, this is right, go for it. That's the midwife that is tender and nourishing and protective and encouraging and meeting people where they are. But the warrior is saying there's an immense battle and the future of the world depends on it. The two can feed each other. The two can nourish each other. They don't have to be opposites.
Well, I guess, which was my point, right? That they don't have to be mutually exclusive. We can have both sort of in play at the same time. And hopefully the breadth of who we can reach would be greater.
Yes, I think if we don't have both of those two things in play, we're not doing her work. We're not doing the work of the divine. Because when you look at the great divine beings, say, I'm thinking of Jesus, you think of someone who is really doing both all the time. On the one hand, Jesus is reaching out with this unbelievable tenderness to absolutely everyone, the drunks and the prostitutes and the crazies and the tax collectors. Everybody is his buddy, is his beloved. And he shows that, and he gives them incredible, miraculous chance to change, to wake up to who they really are. And on the other hand, you have the Jesus who's saying, it has to change. This is madness. This is crazy. So both voices interpenetrate in the divine human, don't they? Jesus can be very ferocious. And that's an important aspect of all of this. If we're too all accepting, we lack discernment. There's some times when we need to be, some rare times, we need to be very ferocious and tell the truth with enormous clarity in a way that makes the floors tremble. Right?
Absolutely. And I'm in my nice side today, but
oh, show me your other side.
I'm not gonna get angry on here, but yeah. It can be tough when I have to be. Yes, I agree. There is a time and a place for all of those aspects. I mean, things are not okay, and there's a time to say that's not okay.
Well, it's not loving to convince people that they're actually safe when they're not. It's not loving. If your child is going towards the edge of a cliff and you scream, you're actually doing the work of love, aren't you?
Or you grab their hand.
Or you grab their hand, yes, and they may cry because it may hurt them when you grab them, but you're trying to save them from going off a cliff.
Yes, you're not going to stand at that moment and say, sweetie, look, here's why we don't jump off cliffs, because you're not going to have time.
No. Can I ask you a question? Because you're interviewing me, but I would love to ask you, to acknowledge you, what made you so passionate about validation and invalidation? What gives you that particular desire to turn up in that hospital?
Well, as you're saying, personal experience.
Yeah.
So yes, I've been through my own experiences. I have done my work to come to a place where I know my own mind. And, I always had a sense of it, but I had to fight for it. Right. There were a lot of forces at work trying to tell me I was something else, or that's not how you feel, and all the usual things. You're too sensitive, and, not being seen for who you are. Right. And I've seen that in so many other people as well. I think I hate to use the word epidemic now because it has a whole new meaning these days after COVID, but I really feel like it is an epidemic of people feeling invalidated, people feeling like they cannot be themselves, or they are not seen for themselves. They are not acknowledged. They're not accepted, and that it slides into every piece of our day in some ways, of something trying to tell you that the way you are is not right, or it's not enough, or it's not what you think it is, and trying to convince you of something else.
Yes.
I just think we have to lift the veil here.
Yeah. Sorry, darling. When you're talking, it's so thrilling because when I'm listening to you, what I'm experiencing is that without that validation, none of the rest of the journey can be possible.
That's
without
right.
believing that you have the right to become a divine human. How could you
Exactly.
ever even start to believe that it was possible? When
So
everybody's
true.
telling you that the normal way you are is totally unacceptable, it's almost impossible for you to believe what the mystics are asking you to believe, that you actually
Mhm.
have these extraordinary powers, this incredible consciousness, this great passion.
You don't believe in your right. And I think most of us don't. I think
Right,
so many of us don't believe in that right and don't believe in our right to our feelings and our wisdom and our beliefs. We're always justifying and explaining everything away. And then even after that, after you maybe do feel you have the right, you have to then figure out, okay, now what does that mean for me? Right? Like
right,
we're so, we've been twisted and turned that there's just so many layers, I think, of other like crap we have to like old clothes we have to peel off. And, without those steps, without really the acceptance that we have a right to that, and then some real hard work figuring out what that is, we can't even begin to take the steps towards a life that is authentic to us, or a life that's meaningful for us, or, any of that. It just feels like we're very
and
we're
that's one of the
very
ways in which
removed.
we are. It's also a kind of, it's one of the ways in which this society has desperately disempowered people for its own purposes. And just the way you're analyzing it is itself an act of great courage and of liberation, because you're showing people the way through. You're showing that there is a way. It's painful, it's difficult, but it's accepting that this pattern of discouragement is at the essence of this kind of authority, this kind of power that we're under. But if you were to, then if we were to take that, which is true, and to say to people, look, in my experience, the most helpful way that you can empower yourself is having a simple spiritual practice that enables you progressively to get in touch with something larger, braver, calmer, wilder than the person you now know. This process of disentangling everything will go much faster and be less complicated and less zigzagged if you simultaneously plunge into deep practice, belief and faith in the mystery, and also start to help others. Not, you don't have to be healed to help others. Helping others is part of the healing.
Healing, yes.
Because the danger of so many people that I come across in the spiritual world who say things not as eloquently as you, but similar to you, is that they spend 10 years unraveling themselves without connecting what they're going through to the agony the world's in, and without responding to it in sacred action, because they still don't feel powerful enough to actually begin to. How do we help them get into a spiritual connection that gives them a greater level of wisdom, and also help them to understand that it's often by reaching out to others and really faking it until you make it, in some ways, of being compassionate and generous, that you learn how to escape your own limitation.
And I wonder if those people you said, may take 10 years or whatever unraveling themselves. I wonder actually if they're even really unraveling themselves, right? Because,
Right,
there's the bypassing and all of that. And
right,
so, you can spend a lot of time and it seems like you're doing the work and you're looking inside, and you can list all your traumas and everything very,
right.
very nicely. But to really find that core, right, that space within is a different situation. I think that's, your point to the having a spiritual practice, or,
Well, that's why I
is a
think that's
way,
the
yes,
essential
to
step.
connect. Yes, to
Yes.
connect to that.
It's not enough to do the psychological shadow work. You must combine that with the mystical work that will uncover your true self beyond good and evil, beyond the opposites, so that you can face what you have to face about yourself. Because one of the paradoxes is that I've discovered, I'm sure you have too, is that you can only go down deep and as deep as you've gone up high. Otherwise, it's too frightening to actually look at the shadow. What in my life has happened is that the further I have seen into my light, the further I have been exposed to the depth of my shadow. And I know that I would never have been able to bear what I've seen in my shadow and the torments and horrors that created it and creates it in the world. I would have to look away if I didn't also have a sense of the light that was also me and I was also part of. So there's a new shadow work trying to be born, which is a fusion of psychological and mystical understanding, and which we're working out. And this will help the process go faster, because the truth is we just don't have time for everybody on the planet to be validated. The planet is dying and burning. We must go as fast and as tenderly and as strongly and as urgently as possible to be as empowered as possible to start acting from the deepest consciousness right now if we're going to have a chance to turn this madness around.
So what would you, if somebody's listening and they hear that this is an emergency,
Yes.
I need to do something now, what is the one thing?
Well, I wouldn't say that actually. I would.
Okay.
No, Dunning. No. I'm just going to throw something out and see if it resonates with you, because I'm loving this conversation with you.
As am I.
What about saying to them, look, it's emergency. What are you going to be? Because the doing that you will do will flow from the being that you become. So how are you going to live this emergency? Are you going to live it as a terrifying, desperate, utterly unwanted, disgusting ordeal? Or are you going to live it as an assignment, as something that has been given to you to rise to? First question. Second question, how are you going to rise to that assignment? You may rise to it eventually, and I hope soon, by doing something, but you won't be able to rise to it without actually working on your being, really trying to discover within yourself levels of power, levels of compassion, levels of energy that you may not even suspect you had, but which there are practices for and there are ways for. And when you're beginning to discover who you can be and that you can rise to this assignment, then choose something wisely that you can do to be of help, because then you'll be really able to be of help, because you'll be strong, you'll be calm, you'll be peaceful, you'll be joyful, you'll be agonized sometimes, but you won't be paralyzed by your act. So there's a complex movement that's necessary to bring people to this stage in which they can truly do the work of sacred activism, do the work of radical regeneration. And it requires, I think, those steps. But they're not rocket science. This society has done a huge job of dumbing us down and of making us feel, in your words, invalidated. And part of the brilliance of that is it means that we feel powerless, impotent, and unable to rise to anything, taking out the garbage, let alone going out to save the whales. What about treating people, as you are advocating so beautifully, with the tenderness and the respect that speaks to them as already partially empowered people, which they actually are, which this society is trying to pretend to them, make them believe they're not. And I've noticed, for example, around the Dalai Lama doesn't tell people, oh, you're so unempowered, you don't know how to do this, and I'll tell you how to do this. The Dalai Lama speaks to the divine that's already in the person. And the greatest teachers are speaking directly to the divine in the person, which the person may not yet be recognizing, but will definitely hear in the voice that's full of love and belief in them and respect for them. And that's why we labored so hard to make it so clear in radical regeneration, because we believe that for all of these terrible forces that are ranged against human beings claiming their power, that there is a divine consciousness in every single human being that knows he or she is powerful and is waiting for that tender, clear, welcoming, invitational, generous voice that says, okay, here are the stages, and we're with you, we'll help you. This is how we do it. But we can't do it separately. I think we have to do it together. We have to do it in the kind of process like we're doing it, a dialogic process, a process of friendship, a process of mutual listening. And amazing things can happen in that process. Imagine if there were 10 of us in a room right now, and we were talking at this level, and we could go through these stages together, acknowledging our fragilities, our shadows and everything, but also pressing onward. By the end of 2 or 3 hours, we might come to an extraordinarily new level of awareness.
Well, creating that kind of space, I can't tell you how many times in the first session with a client, within 5 minutes, they start talking, and just having somebody there, and they can feel me, I guess, loving them and accepting them. And, they're crying, like, right. It's all just coming out, and they've been holding it for so long. And without the opening, we can't make any progress. We need to be open to connect and to grow and all of that.
But
so we have to see each other,
yes.
and send that sense of acceptance, I think, to some extent.
Absolutely. I think that's the basis, and that we really need to retrain ourselves to do that. This is obvious from what's going on in the world. But I think what we're also talking about, which is really, the ancient tribes were very good at this, because they had tribes come together to talk. People come together to process. We need new forms of processing with great elegance and tenderness and communion, helping people. And it's terrifying to think of the human race going through this global dark night, and everybody's on their own suffering instead of being together. These new structures are coming, and they're here already. There's circles that do this. There are what I call networks of grace that do this, 7 to 15 people who come together to help each other. And it's astonishing what can be done like that. You know how astonishing it can be between a client and a therapist. And I know, because I do spiritual, but I also know the astonishing power of loving groups that come together for this purpose. It's incredible what can happen with the combined wisdom and love of 10 to 15 people. No more, because then it gets crazy.
Well, that's right. So how do we scale that then? I mean, it's wonderful to do it in groups. And as you say, hopefully like one group would connect with another group and have healthy dialogue and process and work things out. If we're looking at wanting to really change society, we need to scale that. It has to, it has to be pervasive, that's how things get done for the most part. So how do you see that happening from groups to that place where everything functions differently?
Well, I think to do the kind of healing that you're describing, that I'm describing, we need what I call networks of grace to be formed right now. Everybody to start forming a network of grace between 8 to 15 people who are aligned with them in the deep mission, and to come together regularly. They can do it on Zoom. They can do it, best of all, to do it actually, to celebrate together, to pray together, and to sit in a circle and really ask what's going on in each other's lives. What is their cutting edge? What is the kind of service that is emerging for them? How can they be supported by the other members of the group in that service? And then when you have a network of grace, for example, working with racism in a community, there are some that I've started that are doing that, then through Zoom, through the internet, they can be connected with other networks of grace all over the world doing that same work, because that problem of racism is obviously everywhere. And amazing things can then happen, because the different discoveries of those networks of grace, of what works in this situation, can be shared. That is one way in which it can happen. It has to happen like that because it can't be institutionalized. It has to happen as a personal communal adventure, interconnecting with other personal communal adventures, sharing pain, sharing discoveries, sharing revelations, sharing techniques, and bonding in this great shared work of sacred action.
I love that. I love that phrase, network of grace. That's beautiful.
Thank you. It came in a vision, actually.
Did it?
Well, it was a very funny story. I was in a convent I love convents. I love nuns for some reason. And one of my favorite nuns is a nun called Sister Rosa, and she's in her 80s, and she's been arrested endlessly for telling truth to power. And she's a wonderful, feisty black woman of great passion and great beauty and great heart. And she's one of my favorite people. But I was with her one day and I said, well, how are we going to organize this? And she said, I don't know, but go and ask. Go and do it right now. So, I mean, you didn't disobey Sister Rosa, so I did. And I asked and asked and asked and prayed and prayed and prayed, feeling rather ridiculous. And that night I had a dream. And there were two banners being unfolded in the sky. And on one banner, it said, joy is the power. Joy is the power. Not blame, not fury, not anger. Joy. The joy that comes from knowing that something amazing could come from all this. Right. Joy is the power. And then the other one said networks of grace.
Wow.
And because I'd been studying right-wing organizations and how successfully they operated, because I was studying terrorism and they operate in cells, it suddenly came to me, oh God, oh yes, it's cells, but radiant cells, or what they call the imaginal cells that wake up in, you see, when the caterpillar goes into the chrysalis and dissolves, in the soup of the caterpillar's decayed being, imaginal cells, they're called imaginal cells, wake up and they come together and they form the body of the butterfly that breaks out. This is actually what happened. And I think of the networks of grace as the imaginal cells waking up in the decaying body of the human race to build the butterfly of the divine human.
That's amazing. What a great story. Well, that fits in really nicely with the quote from Radical Regeneration.
I'm so happy to be talking to you right now.
Me too. So this is from your book, Radical Regeneration. Everything now, it is clear, depends on us, on how deeply we open to the heartbreak of a burning world, on how illusionless we allow ourselves to be, and how richly and urgently we act from the deepest possible vision of who we are and who we can yet become. Radical regeneration is our invitation to you to live in joy and compassion, whatever now unfolds, and to dedicate yourself to the impossible, possible birth of a new world out of the smoldering ashes of the old. Beautiful.
Thank you. And radical regeneration is really, it's a mystical symphony. It has 4 parts. And the first part is called Savage Grace, which is a facing of all the crises and a call to really seeing that this is savage grace because it compels us to wake up. Then the second part is called Return to Joy. And we wrote a whole long section on joy because joy is the power. We can't do this work without being grounded in radical joy through experiencing the fundamental goodness of life, the fundamental goodness of the universe, the joy that is the divine bliss. The third part is a plunging into the whole animal situation because both Karen and I are passionate lovers of animals.
As am I.
As you?
As,
do you have an animal?
I do. I have
what
a
do
dog.
You have?
Right now I have a dog.
What's his name?
His name is Huey.
Huey. My cat Jade is my beloved, my eternal beloved is lying where she usually lies in resplendent sleep. Has loving your dog been an initiation for you?
Since I got my first cat when I was 4, animals have, had just been a huge part of my heart and soul. And yeah, really, I don't know. I mean, it sounds cliche, but I really don't know what I would have done without my animal companions over the years. Yes.
I don't think I would want to have stayed alive without my animals to love unconditionally and be loved by in that amazing embodied way that they love. It's
incredible.
Nourishing.
Yes. And it keeps you, all day. It brings you back, right?
Yes.
To that space. You're something's happening with your computer, this, that, whatever. And you're, and then I see my dog and I'm just, you melt and, oh, hey, baby, and it's a whole different situation.
They're not sweating the small stuff.
They are not. I just love my animals. So I feel you on that.
Well, that's why we plunged into, there was a deeper thing too, I think, which is that we need to reclaim our animal, to reclaim ourselves as animals. Because from that reclaiming of ourselves as animals, we get a great deal of energy and passion and strength and eros and joy. And that helps in this great process. And then in the last part, we go into all of the difficulties that are facing the process, but we go deeper even into what the actual transfiguration of the divine human looks like. So this book is a massive map for people, and we've tried to make it as lucid as possible to give everyone the chance to embrace whatever they can find valuable for them along that journey, validate them and encourage them.
Well, and I think the joy is so important. I'm so happy to hear you include that, because that's the fight, right? That's what we're fighting for.
Right.
The way I love my kids, the way I love my dog, the joys we can all experience, and knowing that there is all that beauty in the world, that's what we're fighting for. Right.
Right. When you said, it was about 25 minutes ago, you said you've got to give people something to believe in, something to aim for. That's what joy does. I saw Jane Goodall on TV last night at 88, knowing all she knows about what we're doing to the animals, having gone through all she's been through. There she is, absolutely radiant and encouraging. And when you see someone like that, you just think, I want to be like that. And then you think, well, how do I become like that? And then you think, well, maybe I become like that by giving in the way that she's given, by really, really stepping out of my narrow ego and devoting myself to something larger than myself, because it doesn't end in misery and being dead at the side of the road. It ends in being luminous and radiant and enjoying your whiskey when you're 88 and saying things that just take the tops of people's heads off by their love and wisdom, right?
Absolutely. Well, Andrew, thank you for all that you have given. Thank you for writing this book. I think it's so important, and I feel better knowing it's out there, and I encourage everybody to read it.
Radical regeneration, sacred activism and the renewal of the world. Please, if we've been exciting you, please get it, because it really is. If I was struck by lightning, it's everything that I would love to be able to say to you.
It's such a powerful book. It really is.
Thank you.
And it does feel a little bit like being struck by lightning reading it in a good way, in a necessary way. So thank you. And thank you for being here today. I really have loved this conversation with you so much.
Meeting you.
So
I love the work you're doing.
Thank you.
And I love the voice that you're voicing, because you have a gentle voice, but it's very penetrating. It's truly a divine feminine voice, it seems to me, because it's really standing up for the wounded in people and really trying to help people heal so that they can come into communion and start being and doing something wonderful from the fullness of themselves.
Thank you.
So thank you for your beautiful work. Thank you for you.
That's lovely. It means a lot coming from
love to Huey.
Yes.
Lovely, darling. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening and being part of the conversation. Please find a way to validate yourself today. Maybe find a way to validate someone else too. And if you enjoyed the show, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also join me at No Not Crazy on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Let's build this community of validation together.